The front door was locked. I stood there on the wide wraparound porch of my grandmother's farmhouse in Savannah, Georgia, holding my daughter Ellie's hand, listening to the sound of people laughing inside. The smell of pecan pie and roasted turkey drifted through the cracks in the old wooden frame. It was Thanksgiving. And the door was locked. My husband Marcus was behind me, carrying the sweet potato casserole I'd been up since 5 in the morning to make, Grandma Ruth's recipe, the one she taught me when I was 9 years old. He shifted the dish in his arms and looked at me. I rang the doorbell again. The curtain moved. I saw my stepmother Diane's face appear in the window for just a second, then disappear. A few moments later, the door opened, but only a crack. My father stood there, not opening it wide enough for us to enter. "Natalie," he said, and his voice had that careful, measured tone he always used when he was about to lie. "I thought your sister told you. We moved dinner up to noon this year. We're almost done eating. There's really no room at the table." It was 2:15 in the afternoon, the time Grandma Ruth had told me herself, 2 weeks ago, on the phone. I stared at my father's face, and I knew. I knew with the same certainty I'd known every other time they'd done this. He was lying. "Daddy," Ellie said, tugging on Marcus's jacket. She was 4. She had a construction paper turkey in her other hand, the one she'd made at preschool, with her name written in wobbly purple crayon. "I want to give Pop Pop my turkey." My father didn't look down at her. He kept his eyes on me. "Maybe next time, sweetheart," he said to Ellie, still looking at me. "Daddy can send a photo." Marcus stepped forward. His jaw was tight, but his voice was steady. "Robert, we drove 3 hours. Ellie's been talking about this all week. Can we at least come in and say hello to everyone?" "It's just not a good time," my father said. And then he closed the door. "Before I tell you what happened next, and believe me, you are going to want to hear every word of what my grandmother did when she found out about this, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far this community reaches." The walk back to the car was the longest 30 feet of my life. Marcus carried Ellie on his hip. She was quiet, which was worse than crying. She was staring back at the house with her construction paper turkey crumpled against her chest. "Mommy," she said as Marcus buckled her into her car seat, "did I do something bad?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything bad." "Then why doesn't Pop Pop want my turkey?" I didn't have an answer. Marcus closed her door gently and turned to me. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into a hug right there in the gravel driveway, while inside the house, I could hear someone turn up the music. We got in the car. Marcus drove because my hands were shaking. Not from sadness, from the slow, familiar burn of a wound being reopened for the 100th time. You need to understand something about my family. When my mother died, I was 11. My father remarried Diane 2 years later. Diane had a daughter from her first marriage, my stepsister, Vanessa, who was the same age as me. And from the moment Diane walked through the door, the math changed. There were suddenly 2 girls in the house, but only one of them was hers. It started small. Vanessa got the bigger bedroom. Vanessa got the new clothes at the start of school. I got Vanessa's hand-me-downs. At Christmas, Vanessa's gifts were wrapped in shiny paper and stacked high. Mine were practical. Socks, a coat I needed anyway, a gift card to the bookstore, because Natalie loves to read. When it came time for college, my father paid for Vanessa's tuition at a private university in Atlanta, full ride courtesy of Dad. I got a pamphlet about student loans and a pat on the back. "You're smart, Natalie," he said. "You'll figure it out." And I did. I worked 2 jobs, got scholarships, graduated with honors, and built a career in nursing. I paid off my loans by myself, bought my own car, married a good man, and had a beautiful daughter. I did everything right. And none of it mattered. Because every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering, the message was the same. Vanessa was the daughter. I was the guest. And each time I showed up anyway, smiling, hoping, bringing the casserole, buying the gifts, I was just feeding the machine that kept grinding me down. But this Thanksgiving, standing on that porch watching my father close the door on my 4-year-old daughter, something in me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. Like stepping out of a fog I'd been walking through for 20 years and suddenly seeing the edge of a cliff I'd been inches from the whole time. "We're going home," I said to Marcus. "We're done." He nodded. He didn't argue. He'd been watching this for 8 years. He'd held me after every holiday when I cried in the bathroom so Ellie wouldn't hear. He'd bitten his tongue at dinners where Diane made comments about my weight, my job, my parenting. He'd been patient. But I could see it in his eyes. He was relieved. We were about 20 minutes down Route 17. the Spanish moss hanging low over the road like curtains when my phone rang. Grandma Ruth. My stomach clenched. I almost let it go to voicemail. But Grandma Ruth was different. She was my mother's mother. She was the one who kept my mother's memory alive when everyone else in that house had erased it. She was the one who taught me to cook, who braided my hair, who told me I had my mother's laugh. She was 81 years old, and she was the only reason I still showed up. I answered, "Hey, Grandma, Natalie Marie." Her voice was calm, but I could hear something underneath it, a vibration like a wire pulled too tight. "Where are you?" "We left, Grandma." Dad said dinner was over. He said there wasn't room. Silence. A long, long silence. I could hear the clock ticking in her parlor, the one with the hand-painted face she'd brought from her mother's house in Charleston. "Turn the car around," she said. "Grandma, I don't think." "Natalie, turn the car around and bring my great-grandbaby back to this house. Right now." I looked at Marcus. He'd heard everything. He was already slowing the car. He glanced at me. "Your call," he said. But I trust Ruth. I closed my eyes. Every part of me screamed to keep driving, to protect Ellie, to protect myself. But Grandma Ruth had never, not once in my life, let me down. If she was telling me to come back, there was a reason. "We're coming," I said. The drive back felt like it took an hour. Ellie had fallen asleep in her car seat, her turkey still clutched in her hand. Marcus reached over and squeezed my knee. "Whatever happens," he said, "we handle it together." When we pulled back into the driveway, Grandma Ruth was standing on the porch. She was small, barely 5'2", but she had a presence that made her seem 7 feet tall. She wore her good navy dress, the one she saved for church and funerals, and her silver hair was pinned up in the same French twist she'd worn for 50 years. She was not smiling. She came down the steps as we got out of the car. She went straight to the back seat, opened the door, and gently unbuckled Ellie. My daughter woke up and blinked at her. "Grammy Ruth? Hello, my angel. I heard you made me something special." Ellie held up the crumpled construction paper turkey. "I made it at school. It's you. See? I drew your glasses." Grandma Ruth looked at that turkey like it was made of gold. She held it to her chest. "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever received. Now come inside. There is pie." She carried Ellie up the steps. Marcus and I followed. When we walked through the front door, the conversation in the dining room stopped. I could see them all through the wide archway. My father at the head of the table, Diane to his right, Vanessa and her husband Chad across from them. Vanessa's 2 kids were running around the living room. And there were others, neighbors, friends, people from my father's firm. They all turned to look at us. Diane's smile froze on her face. My father set down his fork. Grandma Ruth walked into the dining room still carrying Ellie on her hip. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. She moved with the calm of someone who has been through enough in her life to know that the truth doesn't need volume. It needs timing. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said. "I hope y'all are enjoying the meal. I spent 3 days cooking it." There were murmurs of appreciation. Someone said, "Best turkey yet, Ruth." "Thank you," she said. Then she turned to my father. "Robert, I have a question for you." My father wiped his mouth with his napkin. "Of course, Mom." When Natalie arrived at 2 o'clock, the time I told her to come, who told her that dinner was already over and there was no room? The room went quiet, not the polite quiet of a pause in conversation. The airless quiet of people who sense something is about to happen. My father cleared his throat. There was a miscommunication. Diane thought we were eating earlier this year and... "Robert," Grandma Ruth said. She set Ellie down and told her to go play with the other children. Then she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out her phone. "This is my house. I have cameras on every door. I have had them since the break-in 3 years ago. You know this." She tapped the screen, turned the volume up, and held it out. My father's voice filled the room, clear as a church bell. "There's really no room at the table." Then, quieter, almost inaudible but not quite, Diane's voice from somewhere behind him. "Just close the door, Robert. She'll leave." The room didn't gasp. It was worse than that. It went completely still. I watched the neighbors' faces change. I watched the couple, from the Historical Society, exchange a look. I watched my father's law partner set down his wine glass. Diane's face went white. "Ruth, that's taken out of context." You were talking about my granddaughter," Grandma Ruth said. "My Natalie, my Caroline's daughter. She said my mother's name like a prayer. You were talking about turning her away from this house, the house my husband built, the house where Caroline grew up. The house where Natalie took her first steps. Mom, let's not do this in front of everyone, my father said, standing up. Sit down, Robert. He sat. Grandma Ruth looked at Diane. Since we are discussing what belongs where, let me ask about something else. Diane, you redecorated the guest bedroom last month. New furniture, new curtains, new bedding? Is that right? Diane blinked. Yes, it needed updating. And where did the old furniture go? The mahogany vanity, the brass bed frame, the cedar chest? Diane looked at my father. My father looked at the table. The cedar chest, Grandma Ruth continued, was my mother's. It came from Charleston in 1952. Inside it, I kept my wedding veil, Caroline's baby shoes, Natalie's christening gown, and a pearl necklace that my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. The chest and everything in it are gone. Where are they, Diane? The silence in the room was so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. I put them in storage, Diane said quickly. I rented a unit. Everything is safe. Storage, Grandma Ruth repeated. She reached into her pocket again, and this time she pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it slowly, deliberately, like a judge reading a verdict. Then perhaps you can explain why I found this receipt in the recycling bin. Treasures and Trinkets Estate Sales. 1 lot, sold. Mahogany vanity, brass bed frame, cedar chest, and contents. Sold for $850. I felt the floor tilt. My mother's baby shoes, my christening gown, Grandma's wedding veil, her pearls. Sold at an estate sale for $850. Diane, Grandma Ruth said, her voice shaking now, not with weakness but with a rage so controlled it was terrifying. My wedding veil, my daughter's baby shoes, my granddaughter's christening gown. You sold them. I didn't know what was in the chest, Diane stammered. I thought it was just old linens. I made a mistake. You knew exactly what was in that chest, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I showed you, Diane. 3 years ago, I showed you everything in that chest because you asked. You said you wanted to see what Caroline looked like as a baby. The room turned to look at Diane. She had no answer. And that's why you didn't want Natalie here today, Grandma Ruth said. Not because of a miscommunication. Not because of a capacity limit. Because Natalie would have noticed. She always notices. She is the only one in this family who cares enough to notice. My father stood up again. Mom, this is getting out of hand. It was a mistake. We'll get the items back. I'll call the estate sale company tomorrow. You will not call anyone tomorrow, Robert, Grandma Ruth said, because I already called them this morning. The lot was purchased by a dealer in Jacksonville. They've already broken it up. The vanity was resold. The bed frame was scrapped. The pearls are gone. Caroline's baby shoes are gone. She paused. The fire in the hearth popped. My wedding veil is gone. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Diane was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Vanessa was staring at her mother with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. It looked like the first crack in a wall that had been standing for years. Grandma Ruth straightened her shoulders. She was small and old and her hands were trembling, but in that moment, she was the most powerful person I had ever seen. Robert, she said, I have loved you like my own son since the day you married my Caroline. I welcomed you into this family. I welcomed Diane. I welcomed Vanessa. I opened my doors, my home, my heart. And what did you do? You erased my daughter. You pushed her child to the margins. You let this woman sell my memories for pocket change. And when Natalie showed up today, as I asked her to, you closed the door in her face and told her there was no room. She looked around the room at every single guest. There is always room in this house. This is Ruth Bellamy's house. I decide who sits at my table, and I am deciding now. She turned to my father and Diane. The carriage house. You've been living there for 7 years, rent-free, because I thought family should be together. I was wrong. You have until Sunday to pack your things and leave. Mom, my father said, his voice cracking. It's Thanksgiving. Where are we supposed to go? I'm sure Diane can check her phone, Grandma Ruth said. She seems to be good at finding deals. A few of the guests looked away. I saw my father's law partner cover his mouth. Vanessa, Grandma Ruth continued, turning to my stepsister. Vanessa flinched. I have nothing against you, child. You are welcome in this house as long as you come honestly. But the monthly allowance I've been sending your mother ends today. If she needs money, she can sell her own things for a change. Then she turned to me. Natalie. Yes, Grandma. This house, the land, the accounts, everything. I already spoke with my lawyer last Tuesday. It's yours. It was always going to be yours. but I wanted to wait until Christmas to tell you. She glanced at Diane. Circumstances changed. My father looked like he'd been slapped. Diane started crying. Not real tears. The kind of tears that come with an audience. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. I can't believe this is happening. On Thanksgiving. In front of everyone. After everything I've done for this family. Nobody comforted her. Nobody moved to her side. The neighbors looked at their plates. My father stood alone. Marcus walked over to where I was standing. He put his arm around me. You okay? He whispered. I nodded. But I wasn't looking at my father or Diane. I was looking at Vanessa. She was sitting very still, her hands in her lap, and she was looking at me. Not with anger, not with jealousy, with something that looked almost like shame. Vanessa, I said. She looked up. Did you know about the chest? She hesitated. Then she shook her head. No. I swear I didn't, Natalie. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know about the door either. Not until just now. I believed her. For the first time in 20 years, I looked at my stepsister and saw not the rival Diane had made her into, but a woman who had been used as a weapon without her consent. Okay, I said. That was all. But something passed between us in that moment. An understanding. Maybe even the beginning of something that could, with time, become real. Grandma Ruth clapped her hands once. Well, she said, the pie is getting cold and I did not spend 4 hours on that pecan crust for it to go to waste. Robert, Diane, I suggest you start packing. Everyone else? Dessert is in the kitchen. My father and Diane left 20 minutes later. They packed 2 suitcases in silence. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded their car. My father paused at the driver's side door and looked up at the house. I don't know what he was looking for. Forgiveness. Permission. A sign that this wasn't really happening. He didn't find it. They drove away. The gravel crunched under their tires, and then it was quiet. That evening, after the guests had gone, after the dishes were washed and the leftovers were put away, I sat on the back porch with Grandma Ruth. Ellie was inside with Marcus, watching a movie, her construction paper turkey taped to the refrigerator with a magnet. The Spanish moss hung still in the warm Georgia evening. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. Grandma, I said, how did you know about the chest? She smiled, a small, tired smile. I went looking for my veil. I wanted to show it to Ellie. I thought she'd like to see what Grammy Ruth looked like as a bride. She paused. When I opened that room and saw everything gone, I knew. I didn't even have to ask. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed to see what they would do on their own. I needed to see if your father would tell the truth, if Diane would come clean, if anyone in that house would do the right thing without being forced. She looked at me. They didn't. I'm sorry, Grandma. Don't you dare apologize. You are the only one in this family who has nothing to apologize for. We sat in silence for a while. Then she reached over and took my hand. Your mother would be so proud of you, Natalie. I see her in everything you do. The way you love that little girl, the way you keep showing up, even when they don't deserve it. That's Caroline. That's my daughter, living through you. I cried then. Not the quiet, hidden tears I'd been crying for 20 years. Real tears. The kind that wash things clean. 6 months later, the farmhouse was transformed. Marcus and I moved in full-time. We painted the rooms in warm colors. We opened the curtains that Diane had always kept closed. We planted a garden in the backyard, and Ellie helped, her little hands covered in dirt, laughing as she dropped seeds into the soil. Grandma Ruth was still with us, still sharp, still cooking her famous pecan pie every Sunday. She taught Ellie to braid, just like she'd taught me, just like she'd taught my mother. My father called once, about 2 months after Thanksgiving. He wanted to talk. He said he'd made mistakes. He said Diane had influenced him. He said he was sorry. I told him I appreciated the call. I told him I forgave him. And then I told him I wasn't ready to see him. Maybe someday, but not yet. Vanessa called more often. She'd left Chad. She'd started therapy. She told me things I'd never known, that Diane had told her for years that I hated her, that I resented her for existing, that I wanted her gone. We'd both been lied to. We'd both been played against each other by a woman who needed a villain to justify her cruelty. We weren't close yet, but we were talking, and that was more than we'd ever had. Diane never called. I heard she was living in a condo in Buckhead, telling anyone who would listen that Ruth had lost her mind, and I had manipulated a senile old woman into giving me everything. The people who knew Grandma Ruth laughed at that. Ruth Bellamy, senile. The woman who could recite every Supreme Court decision since Brown v. Board and beat you at chess while doing it. As for the cedar chest and everything in it was gone. The pearls, the veil, the baby shoes, I mourned them. Some things can't be replaced. But Grandma Ruth told me something that stayed with me. The memories aren't in the objects, Natalie. They're in you. You are the chest. You carry everything. One evening, about a year after that Thanksgiving, I was sitting in the parlor. The clock was ticking. Ellie was asleep upstairs. Marcus was reading in the armchair. Grandma Ruth was dozing by the fire, a blanket across her lap. I looked at the mantel. There were 4 stockings hanging there, even though Christmas was still weeks away. Ellie had insisted. She'd written the names herself in glitter glue. Natalie, Marcus, Ellie, Grammy Ruth. For the first time in my life, I looked at those stockings and felt something I had never felt in this house before. I felt like I belonged. I looked at you. Right now. Right here. If you are watching this, and you know what it feels like to stand on the wrong side of a locked door, if you know what it feels like to show up with a casserole and a smile and still not be enough, if you know what it feels like to watch your child ask why they aren't wanted, I need you to hear me. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not the problem. You are standing at the wrong door. Stop knocking. Stop waiting for them to open it. Stop bringing your best dish to a table that was never set for you. Turn around. Get in your car. Drive until the road feels different. And then build your own table. Set it with love. Fill it with people who don't need a camera to remind them to be kind. Because here is what nobody tells you about cutting off toxic family. You don't lose a family. You lose the performance of one. And what you gain, what you build in its place, with the people who actually show up, who actually see you, who tape your daughter's construction paper turkey to the refrigerator like it belongs in a museum. That is real. That is yours. And nobody can lock you out of that.